Claude Code is the undisputed king of AI coding. But 12 months ago, I was just prompting and praying, barely scratching the surface of what Claude Code could do. Fast forward to today, and I'm a Claude Code power user. I can use multiple Claude Codes and Ralph Wiggum loops to work on a week's worth of features at once. I've built custom commands, agent skills, and sub-agents tailored to my exact workflows. And I can delegate my to-do list to Claude and come back to PRs ready to review. And in this video, I'm going to save you 12 months of pain by sharing 52 specific lessons about how to get the most out of Claude Code. All 52 lessons are based on my experience of using Claude Code to build real applications over the past year, and they're organized into 3 clear levels: beginner, intermediate, and master. In level 1, the beginner section, we'll cover Claude Code foundations. We'll cover installation and setup, the best models and modes to use when building, and the Claude.md file and what to put in it for best results. In level 2, the intermediate section, we're going to look at customizations and workflows. We'll cover creating custom commands and agent skills, using MCPs and plugins to build productively, and I'll share the exact workflows that I use to build, test, and document new features. And finally, in level 3, the master section, we're going to look at advanced workflows that push the limits of what's possible with Claude Code. We'll cover working on multiple features at the same time with multiple Claude Codes and Git worktrees, using Ralph Wiggum loops to let Claude iterate autonomously, creating feedback loops to help Claude self-improve, and delegating tasks for Claude to work on async so that you can come back to PRs ready for review. So whether you're just starting out with Claude Code or already use it every day, I can guarantee that you're going to learn something from this video that's going to help you build better with Claude Code. Let's dive into level 1, Claude Code Foundations. If you're new to Claude Code or want to revisit the basics, this section is for you. Tip number 1 is to use Claude Code in the terminal. The primary way most people use Claude Code is by installing it on your laptop or on your desktop computer. Just copy the install command from the Claude Code webpage or docs, paste it into your terminal, and you're up and running. It's quick, it's easy, and you can begin coding on your local machine right away. Now you can also install Claude Code on a remote server. So if you're working on back-end projects and using something like AWS, DigitalOcean, or Hetzner, just SSH into the server and install Claude Code like you would Python or Node. This is great for back-end projects where you want to work directly on the server. To start Claude Code, just type Claude into your terminal. A pro tip here is that you can use the -- resume flag to continue a previous session. Just type Claude -- resume and then select the session that you want to resume. The terminal can be intimidating, especially if you've never used one before. So tip number 2 is, if you prefer using an app, use the Claude Desktop app. The Claude Desktop app gives you all the power of Claude Code in an easy-to-use app without the terminal learning curve. It gives you a friendly development interface with the chats layout that you're familiar with from Claude or ChatGPT on the web. If you're a complete beginner who wants to start building with Claude Code, I highly recommend using the desktop app for the easiest way to get started. Tip number 3 is, if you're used to working in IDEs like VS Code, Cursor, or Windsurf, use Claude Code in your IDE. There's actually 2 ways to do this. The first way is a VS Code extension. It gives you a more integrated UI experience directly in your IDE, with easy-to-use buttons and menus for Claude Code's different modes and settings. The second way is just to open a terminal window inside your IDE and run Claude Code there. This is the approach that I take most often. Both approaches let you use Claude Code inside the tools that you already use and trust, allowing you to edit files and view changes side by side while Claude writes code or advises you on decisions. Next up, tip number 4. For coding on the go, use the Claude Code web and mobile apps. This is great for developing on the go and working on tasks async. You can kick off a new feature, a bug fix, or just ask a question about your projects, and Claude will work on it in the background while you're away from your desk. You can even teleport sessions from the web app to your local terminal to continue working. So you can start a task on the web, let Claude make progress, and then teleport to your local machine to test and modify it when you're ready to dig in. Next up, let's talk about models and modes to use in Claude Code. Tip number 5 is to use the best models. Claude Code has 3 models: Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku. Opus is the most powerful, but it's also the most expensive. Sonnet is a great middle ground between intelligence and cost, and Haiku is the fastest and cheapest model. My advice is to use the best model as much as possible. Right now, that's Opus 4.6, but it might be different when you're watching this video. I find that I get the best results when I use Opus for everything, because even though it's a bigger and slower model, I find that it makes fewer mistakes, so I end up being able to move faster because I spend less time debugging or steering the model. Note that if you're worried about hitting limits, I recommend using Sonnet 4.6 as your default model and saving Opus for the most complex or important tasks. Next up is tip number 6. Get a Claude Max plan if you can afford it. Claude Code is only available on paid plans. There's a $20 a month Pro plan or the $100 to $200 a month Max plans. While the Pro plan is a great deal to start exploring Claude Code, I recommend getting a Max plan if you're serious about building. The Max 5x plan at $100 a month gives you 5x higher rate limits, and the Max 20x plan, $200 a month, gives you 20x higher rate limits, plus first access to new Anthropic products. You can also use API pricing, but unless your company is paying for it, I found this way too expensive for individual use. So just get a Pro plan or a Max plan and don't look back. Next up is perhaps the most important tip in the beginner section. Tip number 7, start most tasks in plan mode. Simply put, plan before you start building. When Claude is in plan mode, it thinks through the task, breaks it down into steps, and asks clarifying questions before it starts building. This leads to way better results. The most common mistake I see people make with Claude Code is not using plan mode enough. What makes plan mode so powerful is that you can review the plan and iterate on it with Claude until you're happy for Claude to start building. A tip for getting the most out of plan mode is tip number 8, get Claude to ask you questions using the Ask User Question tool. When you start a task, tell Claude to use the Ask User Question tool to ask you clarifying questions about whatever you're trying to do, whether it's building a project spec, planning a new feature, or making a big change to your project. This is incredibly useful because it helps Claude surface things you might not have fully thought through or decisions that need to be made. By answering these questions, you and Claude get way more clarity about what you actually want and what matters for the task at hand. Next up, tip number 9, let Claude handle bash commands. Claude has a bash tool which enables it to run bash commands itself, meaning it can read and write files, search your codebase, and handle Git commands for you. You retain control by approving specific commands or specifying which commands Claude can and can't run via permissions. There's also bash mode, which lets you run bash commands inside Claude Code without exiting out. I find this useful for quick directory navigation, Git, or CLI commands. Tip number 10 is to use the extended thinking mode. The extended thinking mode gives Claude Code a scratch pad for deeper reasoning. It's like giving Claude extra brain space to work through complex problems. Tip number 11 is to use the Explore subagent for code-based search. The Explore subagent is designed to rapidly gather context from your codebase. It's powered by Haiku under the hood, which means that it's cheap and extremely fast. Claude Code uses it automatically when it detects that your task needs codebase exploration, but you can also explicitly invoke it for tasks that involve understanding your project. I found the Explore subagent useful for quickly getting up to speed on a new project, writing documentation like in architecture.md, or just understanding the codebase before implementing a new feature. Next up, let's talk about one of the most important concepts in Claude Code, the Claude.md file. Tip number 12 is to give your project memory with the Claude.md file. Claude.md is your project's memory. It gets added to context every single time Claude starts a session. Think of it as your project's briefing doc. Every time Claude starts a session, it reads this first to understand the most important information about your project, like what the project is, how you like to work, and what matters most. Keep your Claude.md concise and only include the most relevant information. Here are 7 things I recommend putting in your Claude.md file: project goals, architecture overview, design and style guides, constraints and policies, repo and Git etiquette, frequently used commands, and testing instructions. A pro tip for writing a good Claude.md is to link off to other files from your Claude.md. For example, I like to include an overview of topics, but link off to more in-depth docs like my project spec doc or my architecture.md file. This keeps my Claude.md concise while still giving Claude a way to access deeper context. And if you're wondering how to create a Claude.md, use the /init command or just ask Claude to create a Claude.md for you and to use the Ask User Question tool to interview you for extra information to populate it. The next Claude Code tip for beginners is tip number 13, actively manage your context window. Context management is a key skill for getting good results out of Claude Code. Each session has a context window, and if it fills up with irrelevant context from previous things you've asked Claude, your results for future tasks can suffer. To overcome this, I recommend starting a fresh session for new tasks. I do this by using the /clear command to reset context within a session. I like to use /clear liberally once I finish working on a specific chunk of work. To check how much context you've used, use the /context command. It gives you the context used by your previous messages, as well as things like MCPs, plugins, and other customizations. Another context management tip is to avoid auto-compaction. When Claude runs out of context, it tries to compress the conversation, but important details can get lost. It's been shown that results suffer after auto-compaction, so try to avoid it as much as possible. Next up, use Claude for debugging. Claude is great at interpreting errors and figuring out what needs to be done to debug issues. Just copy and paste errors, logs, and issues directly into your prompt and ask Claude to investigate. I recommend including full error messages and what you are trying to do when the error occurred. The more context, the better. On the topic of debugging, here's tip number 15. Practice screenshot debugging. Claude can take image inputs, so if you see errors or something wrong in your UI, take a screenshot and paste it directly into your prompt. This lets Claude see exactly what you see. The visual context usually helps it pinpoint exactly what went wrong or where in the UI you want to make a fix. I find screenshot debugging much easier than trying to describe a visual bug in words. The next tip in the beginner section is to get Claude to manage Git for you. Claude Code has a bash tool, which means it can run Git commands. So for project level version control, I recommend using Git and letting Claude handle things like committing work, creating branches, and merging changes. For best results, tell Claude your Git preferences for committing, branching, and naming in your Claude.md file. For example, I often ask Claude to do things like always include descriptive branch names, commit while you work, and create feature branches of main. I also recommend using the GitHub CLI. This enables Claude to commit code, push to branches, create PRs, and even manage your GitHub issues in your repos, all from your local sessions. Tip number 17 is to use checkpoints and rewind to roll back within a session. Claude Code automatically saves checkpoints of the code and context before each change. One checkpoint gets created per prompt. If Claude starts going down the wrong path, you can use the /rewind command to view all the checkpoints and select which one you want to go back to. You can rewind the code, the context, or both. One important thing to note is that checkpoints are not a replacement for Git. They're for quick session level recovery. So I recommend still using Git and GitHub for overall project version control. Tip number 18 is to customize your status line. The status line gives you important information at a glance while developing with Claude Code in the terminal. In my status line, I like to include things like the Git repo name, the current branch, and the context percentage I've already used. Use the /status line command to customize what appears. The status line is a small thing, but I found it a nice addition to help me proactively manage sessions better. Next up, let's talk about prompting. Tip number 19 is to give Claude lots of context in your prompts. Good prompting is one of the biggest levers for improving your outputs with Claude Code. My advice is to treat Claude like a smart employee or coworker that you're delegating a task to. This means doing things like setting clear goals and success criteria, mentioning specific files, folders, and tools to use, and describing the before and after situation that you want. The more relevant context you supply, the better results Claude will produce. To wrap up the beginner section, let's talk about what to do when you get stuck. When you get stuck or you're not sure about how to do something, follow tip number 20. Just ask Claude. Claude is your always available collaborator and thought partner. Don't be afraid to ask it questions about your project, about using Claude itself, or even about which approach to take for a technical decision. Just Ask Claude is my #1 piece of advice for succeeding with Claude Code as a beginner, so use it to help you get unstuck. The final tip in the beginner section is tip number 21, use the Claude Code guide subagent to help you use Claude Code better. In the spirit of Just Ask Claude, there's actually a built-in subagent specially designed to answer questions about Claude Code. It's called the Claude Code Guide subagent. If you're not sure about how to use a feature or want to know best practices, I recommend using this subagent because it can give you up-to-date information and answer in the context of your specific project. That's way better than reading the docs or getting generic information from a web search. That brings us to the end of level 1, the beginner section. You've now got a rock-solid foundation for building your first projects with Claude Code. Let's shift up a gear to level 2, the intermediate section, where we're going to look at how to be truly productive with Claude Code. I'm going to share with you the customizations that I use to tailor Claude Code to my exact workflow, the development loop that I use to build every feature, and the verification and documentation practices that keep my tests green and my projects organized. First up, customizations. Tip number 22, if you ask Claude the same thing twice, create a custom / command for it. Think of custom / commands as prompt shortcuts. If you find yourself asking Claude to do the same thing over and over again, create a / command for it. Here are some examples of / commands that I've created. I have a create issues / command, which creates GitHub issues from a project spec, turning a big project into smaller, actionable units. I have an update docs and commit / command, which updates my project documentation and creates a commit after we finish implementing a feature. I also have a what's next / command, which tells me what's next in the project based on GitHub issues, commit history, and my project spec doc. To create a custom / command, just ask Claude. Make sure to include the name of the command and what you want it to do at a high level. / commands can take arguments for dynamic input, include inline bash commands, and reference files. Tip 23 is to use MCP servers to give Claude access to third-party tools and services. MCP, or Model Context Protocol, extends Claude Code's capability to take action in third-party tools. You can think of MCP as USB-C for AI tools. It enables agents like Claude Code to both access information and take actions in these tools. The MCP ecosystem is maturing fast. Whatever tools you use in your stack, there's probably an MCP server for it. Some MCPs that I personally use and recommend are the Playwright MCP for browser automation and testing, the MongoDB and Superbase MCP servers for database operations, and Vercel and Cloudflare MCPs for anything deployment or infra related. Installing an MCP server is simple. Just follow the docs for the tools that you want, and Claude will walk you through the setup. Just be mindful of the permissions that you're granting and scope them to only what's necessary. Next up in customizations, we have skills, and tip 24, which is use third-party skills to teach Claude specialized knowledge. Skills are packaged instructions that give Claude relevant context about a specialized topic on demand. At their core, skills are just files and folders, with a skill.md file that loads specialized knowledge into Claude when it needs it. Some skills that I recommend are the front-end design skill from Anthropic, document creation and editing skills for common formats like PDF, PowerPoint, and Word, also from Anthropic, Expo skills for mobile app development with React Native, and the Superbase best practice skills for Postgres. Skills use progressive disclosure, meaning that Claude only sees skill names and descriptions initially. It then loads the full skill files and reference files only when relevant. This helps prevent context bloat. If you're looking for skills to try, check out skills.sh, a directory of skills for everything from web and mobile development to test-driven development frameworks, planning, marketing, and more. Using third-party skills are great, but the real power is in creating your own skills. And that's where tip number 25 comes in, which is create your own skills to teach Claude personal or business knowledge. To create your own skill, just use the /skill creator skill. You can find it in the Anthropic example skills plugin and it walks you through how to create effective skills step by step. I recommend creating your own skills when you want Claude to reference specialized personal or business knowledge. For example, company-specific processes, brand guidelines, development practices, and operating procedures. A key benefit of skills is that they can be auto-discovered and used by Claude. This makes the most important part of a skill the description, and specifically when Claude should use a skill. So a pro tip here is to be specific about the scenarios, keywords, and topics where you want Claude to use your skill. Skills can also be manually invoked by running the /skill name, just like a / command. A pro tip is that you can tune skills over time. If a skill isn't being used in a certain scenario, ask Claude to upgrade the description so it triggers in that specific scenario going forward. Next up in the customization section is plugins. And tip number 26, which is to use plugins to add power user best practices to your workflow. Plugins are bundles of customizations. They can contain custom commands, sub-agents, MCP servers, hooks, and skills. Plugins are great for discovering and adopting best practices without having to set everything up yourself. Use the /plugin command to browse and install new plugins. Plugins come from marketplaces. Think of marketplaces like an app store and the plugins as apps. I recommend starting with plugins from the official Claude Code marketplace. Some plugins that I use and recommend are Feature Dev from Anthropic, which gives you specialized sub-agents for each part of building new features. Code Review, also from Anthropic, for automating PR reviews, and any of the language server protocols or LSP plugins for languages that you use, for example, TypeScript or Python. I also recommend using the Ralph Loop plugin from Anthropic and the Compound Engineering plugin from Every. We'll cover those in more depth in Level 3, the Advanced section. Keep in mind that plugins and their components can take up context, so enable and disable them on demand to avoid context bloat. Tip number 27, a pro tip for customizations is to set the right scope. Scopes are about where you can access customizations like plugins, MCPs, and skills. Do you want to keep it to only this project? This is local scope. Do you want it to be available across all your Claude Code projects? This is user scope. Or do you want to be able to commit it to Git and share it with your team? This is project scope. To move a skill, plugin, or MCP to a different scope, just ask Claude. It'll handle relocating the files to match the scope that you want. Next up, let's look at a plugin in action. Tip number 28. Use the front-end design plugin to improve your UI designs. The front-end design skill and plugin from Anthropic dramatically improves the visual quality of UIs that Claude generates. It loads design principles and best practices into context. The difference is dramatic. Without the plugin, you get generic-looking UIs and purple gradients. With it, you get interesting, polished designs. I highly recommend using the front-end design plugin and associated skill to improve how your application looks and feels. Next up is sub-agents, and tip number 29, which is to use custom sub-agents for domain-specific or background tasks. Unlike /commands, which run in the current context window, sub-agents run in a fresh, isolated context window. This enables them to run in the background and in parallel. Custom sub-agents are great for tasks like testing your app end-to-end, updating change logs, running security reviews, or doing research, anything that can happen independently. The easiest way to create a sub-agent is the /agents wizard in Claude Code. It walks you through setting up the agent name, description, tools, and system prompt. Once created, Claude automatically knows your sub-agents exist and will delegate tasks to them when relevant based on the description in the agent file. There are also built-in sub-agents in Claude Code, like Task for parallel work, as well as Plan, Explore, and Bash, which we saw in Level 1. The last tip on customization is tip number 30, use high effort in Opus for complex tasks. With Opus 4.6, you can control the level of effort. For complex, multi-step tasks where quality really matters, set Claude to high effort mode. This makes Claude take more time reasoning through the problem, which leads to significantly better results on hard tasks. Next up in Level 2 is workflows. Starting with tip number 31, practice spec-driven development. Create a project spec doc before you start building. I found that project spec docs need two things to produce good results: product requirements, which is what you're building and why, and engineering requirements, which is how you're building it. Rather than trying to build everything at once, break down your project into milestones, maybe an MVP, and then version 1 and version 2 with more functionality. This helps Claude build your project in phases. I found that this also helps Claude make fewer mistakes compared to asking it to build everything at once. You can also use Claude Code and the Ask User question tool to help you create your project spec doc in the first place. Give Claude a high-level overview of what you want to build and ask it to interview you to create a project spec with product and engineering requirements. The next workflow is tip number 32, use Claude Code for research. Claude Code can compile research reports using its web search tool and output structured files for you and Claude to read. This can help you make more informed decisions, taking into account the context of your project. In the past, I've asked Claude to create research reports to help me answer questions like, what's the best way to prompt the Gemini image API? What authentication solution should I use? And how do I set up Stripe Connect for my project? Next, let's talk about testing. Tip number 33 is to practice test-driven development. Get Claude to write tests before implementing features, and then implement just the functionality that you need to make the test pass. You can even create a /tdd/ command that takes in a feature description and runs a test-driven development workflow automatically. Test-driven development prevents regressions and helps Claude understand the success and failure modes before implementation. Even if you don't use test-driven development, getting Claude to write tests like unit tests, end-to-end tests, and integration tests for your project is something that helps me produce good outcomes, and I highly recommend doing it for your projects. Next up is a workflow that I use most often, and is perhaps the most important workflow that I'm going to share in this video. Tip number 34 is every time you build a feature, use the RPIT loop. RPIT is my workflow for building individual features with Claude Code. It stands for research, plan, implement, and test. In the research phase, you ask Claude to create a research report about any APIs or new technologies that are needed to build a feature. A research step up front saves a lot of headaches during implementation. The research step is optional, but I recommend it for bigger features where Claude needs to make tech stack decisions or integrate new APIs into a project. In the plan phase, you use plan mode to have Claude break down the work and ask clarifying questions using the Ask User Questions tool. The plan phase is the most important step as it helps Claude translate your requirements into steps that it can take. In the implementation phase, Claude builds a feature using all the plugins, sub-agents, MCPs, and skills that you have set up. In the testing phase, Claude verifies that the feature works through unit tests, integration tests, and even browser automation with MCPs to verify the user experience. The RPIT loop works for both complex and simple features. The steps are the same, you just need to adjust how much time you spend on each step. To start my RPIT loop, I usually point Claude to a GitHub issue, which brings me to tip number 35, use an external source of truth like GitHub or Linear. I use GitHub issues as my external source of truth for all the features and tasks in my project. This avoids the messiness of having lots of random markdown files scattered throughout your repo. GitHub becomes the one place where all your planned work lives. It also makes it easy to automate workflows. For example, I've created custom / commands for things like automatically creating issues from project specs and analyzing my Git history and issues to tell me what to work on next on each of my open branches. For personal projects or small teams, I found getting Claude to use GitHub issues via the GitHub CLI is the simplest and most integrated option. But this approach works just as well using tools like Linear, Jira, or other project management tools via CLI or MCP. Another advantage of using something like GitHub as a source of truth is that it enables you to practice issue-based development, which is tip number 36. Issue-based development lets you ask Claude to work on issues directly from GitHub. Instead of prompting Claude with long descriptions, I can just ask Claude to work on issue 15. Claude will read the issue from GitHub, understand the context, implement the fix or the feature, and can even close the issue and create a PR when it's done. The final part of level 2 is about verification and documentation. And first up, here's one of the biggest mindset shifts that has helped me to do more with Claude Code. Tip number 37, verify at higher levels of abstraction. Everyone can agree that it's important to review and verify the work done by Claude to ensure that it works and that it's safe. Now, I found the best way to verify that Claude produced correct code isn't to read the code line by line, but to verify at higher levels of abstraction. It means using things like automated code reviews, unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, and both automated and manual user experience verification. So, in addition to reading the code produced by Claude, ask yourself how you can use things like tests, acceptance criteria, security audits, and user experience audits to check Claude's work. This is a mindset shift that I had to make, and it's similar to what I experience in real life when I manage smart, technical people. This same principle applies to Claude. And speaking of checking Claude's work, tip number 38 is to give Claude a way to verify its own work. Give Claude build scripts, automated tests, success criteria, and browser automations in your workflow. This enables Claude to check its own work and make changes accordingly. I found the Playwright MCP to be excellent here. It lets Claude actually open a browser, navigate your app, and verify that things actually work the way a user would. The key idea here is that Claude shouldn't just build. It should also be able to confirm that what it built actually works and make changes if not. Next up, let's talk about documentation. Tip 39 is to automatically document your project with Claude. Have Claude create and maintain documentation for your project. Here are the docs that I usually ask Claude to create and automatically update for every project. First up is the architecture.md file for how the system works. Then changelog.md for what changed and when. And finally, a project-spec.md as a living spec. I recommend linking off to these files in your Claude.md, so Claude always knows where to find and update them. You can also create slash commands or sub-agents to keep these up to date. For example, I've created a slash command that updates documentation and commits the changes after big features are added. And the last tip in level 2, the intermediate section, and perhaps the most underrated, is tip number 40, iteratively improve your Claude.md file. The Claude.md file isn't something you just set and forget. Your Claude.md is a living document. Update it as you add new features, reach new milestones, or discover new things that Claude keeps getting wrong. A pro tip is to create a slash command to have Claude review and update the Claude.md after you complete a feature or a bug fix. This brings us to the end of level 2, the intermediate section. You now have the customizations and workflows to be more productive than 90% of Claude Code users out there. But hold up, because we have one more exciting level to cover, and that's level 3, the master section. Level 3 is going to cover workflows that push the limits of what's possible with Claude Code. If you've ever wondered what it looks like to use Claude Code like a true power user, this is it. We'll cover working on multiple features at the same time with multiple Claude codes and Git worktrees, using Ralph Wiggum loops to let Claude iterate autonomously, creating feedback loops to help Claude self-improve, and how to delegate tasks for Claude to work on async. First up is tip 41, use parallel subagents to speed up development of a single feature. When working on a complex feature, ask Claude to identify which steps can be done in parallel and to use parallel subagents to work on them at the same time. You can prompt Claude with something like, break down this feature implementation, identify which tasks are independent and can be executed in parallel, and create task subagents for the parallel work. This speeds up the implementation of a single feature by running multiple subagents simultaneously on different parts of the work, versus waiting for Claude to implement them one by one. The next tip in this master section is about multi-agent development, and it's the big one. Run multiple Claude Code instances at the same time. This is where you run multiple Claude Code sessions in parallel, each working on a different feature of the same project. This is also known as multi-clauding because you're running multiple Claude Codes at the same time. Having multiple Claude Codes running at the same time allows you to build a week's worth of features in just a few hours. You move from pair programming or managing a single Claude to becoming the conductor of an orchestra of AI coding agents. My advice for multi-clauding is to start with 2 or 3 Claudes and then add more agents as you get comfortable. And make sure that you're following the testing and verification tips from level 2 so that each Claude can test and verify its work. Now you might be thinking, if we're running multiple Claude codes and they're working on the same code base, how do we ensure that they don't get in each other's way? Enter Git worktrees, and tip number 43, use Git worktrees to multi-claude safely on the same project. Git worktrees let you have multiple working copies of your repo in different directories, each on a different branch, while sharing the same Git history. This is how I run multiple Claudes safely. Each Claude Code instance works in its own worktree with isolated files so that they can't step on each other's changes. And here's the best part. Claude Code now has built-in worktree support. Just use the worktree or -w flag to start a session in a new worktree. This creates an isolated copy of your repo, which lives in the .claude/worktrees folder on a new branch, all without any manual setup. When you're done with your worktrees, you can push the worktree branch and open PRs for final review, or merge directly into main or a new feature branch for further testing. And if you want an easy way to get started with multi-clauding and Git worktrees, you'll like tip 44, which is to use the Claude Code desktop app as your multi-agent control center. The Claude Code desktop app can automatically create worktrees for you when you run multiple sessions. All you need to do is check the worktree option when kicking off a new session, making it easy to run multiple Claude Code sessions on the same code base, each in their own isolated worktree and branch. The desktop app also makes it easy to monitor and switch between different Claude sessions and worktrees just by using the session list in the sidebar and checking the progress of different sessions that way. It's also worth noting that in addition to having multiple Claudes working on the same project, you can of course run multiple Claudes working on different projects, and the desktop app is a great way to do that and easily keep track of the different sessions. Next up is a practice that took my usage of Claude Code to a new level, and that's tip 45, set up feedback loops to help Claude self-improve over time. After every feature build or RPIT build loop, add a reflection step where you and Claude reflect on what went well, what was challenging, and what could be improved. This creates 2 loops, an inner build loop, which is RPIT for a single feature, and an outer improvement loop, which captures learnings and feeds them back in to the next build. To do this, I built a custom retro skill that I run after I finish each feature or project milestone. It looks at Git history, test results, and conversation history to gather context, reflects on the session, and then suggests concrete improvements to my Claude.md and documentation, and also improvements or new commands and skills for me to create. I also recommend trying out 2 plugins to help Claude Code reflect and improve. First, the Compound Engineering plugin from Every, which contains a set of customizations that helps Claude Code self-improve and make every unit of engineering easier than the last. In particular, try out the /review and /compound workflows, which review and document learnings to make future work easier. Second, check out the Claudeception skill. It helps enable Claude to extract and create new skills as you build, so that next time you run into a similar issue, the skill can be loaded automatically, allowing Claude to continuously learn as you build. Next up, Ralph Wiggum loops. For tasks with clear success criteria, use Ralph Wiggum agent loops. The Ralph Wiggum loop is a way to run Claude Code that's named after a Simpsons character who just keeps going no matter what. The key principle of Ralph Wiggum is that persistent iteration despite setbacks is remarkably effective to solve tough problems. Here's what it looks like in practice. You give Claude a task and success criteria. Then the same prompt is fed repeatedly to Claude in a loop. Claude then iterates on the problem, improving, fixing, refining, until it meets a success criteria or runs out of loop iterations. To get started with Ralph Wiggum loops, try the Ralph Loop plugin from Anthropic. It comes with built-in hooks that refeeds in the prompt whenever Claude stops. There are also other Ralph Wiggum implementations like Ryan Carson's Ralph Skills plugin, which I also recommend for something a little more advanced. A big thing to remember is that the Ralph Wiggum loop is not suitable for everything. I recommend using Ralph only for tasks with clear success criteria, those suited to iterative refinement, greenfield projects, or working through a list of bugs. I don't recommend using Ralph Wiggum on tasks that require taste and judgment, one-shot operations, or tasks with unclear success criteria. Next up in the master section, let's look at delegating tasks for Claude to work on async. The first way to do this is tip 47, use the web and mobile app to develop async. Claude Code on the web or mobile is the best way to have Claude work on small features and bugs totally async. You can also work on multiple repos at the same time, each in its own sandbox session. The key to good outcomes is not just to delegate the work, but to make the output easily reviewable. So after Claude finishes a task, I use the web app to create a PR with the changes so that Claude can review and test later. Claude Code can also kick off tasks where you work, which brings us to tip 48, use the Claude Code GitHub action. The Claude Code GitHub action enables you to have Claude run in GitHub without opening your terminal or Claude apps. You can tag Claude in issues and PRs and have it fix bugs, review code, update documentation, or just answer questions about the project. You can also enable Claude Code Review, which is where Claude will automatically review new PRs in a repo and suggest changes. You can install the Claude Code GitHub action by running the /install GitHub app command. But GitHub isn't the only place you can delegate work to Claude. There's also tip 49, which is to use Claude in Slack with the Claude Code Slack app. With the Claude Code Slack app, you can tag Claude in Slack channels to get questions answered, have Claude kick off bug fixes, or trigger PR reviews. This is a game changer for teams where Slack is the main communication hub. Anyone can delegate work to Claude without switching to a terminal or the Claude app, meaning that even PMs, marketers, and executives can benefit. Next up is a more advanced way to use Claude Code. Tip number 50, have a team of Claudes work together on complex features with agent teams. Agent teams is one of the newest capabilities in Claude Code. It lets you split complex work across specialized Claude instances that coordinate with each other. I don't recommend using agent teams for everything. They're most useful when a feature can be cleanly split into distinct specialized roles. For example, front-end, back-end, and testing. Agent teams coordinate multiple Claude Code instances using a shared task list and messaging system. By default, teammates share the same working directory, which is why they can sometimes step on each other's changes. To solve this, you can give teammates worktree isolation so that each teammate gets its own copy of the repo. Think of agent teams as multi-clauding with coordination built in, where multiple agents collaborate on the same feature, versus what we saw in the multi-clauding section, which was having parallel agents working on features independently. We're almost at the end, so let's keep going with tip number 51. Instead of using dangerously skip permissions, pre-configure permissions. Running Claude with dangerously skip permissions is tempting because it lets Claude run without asking you to improve every action. But it's got dangerous in its name for a reason, so use it with caution. Instead, I recommend pre-configuring permissions for the commands, tools, and actions that Claude needs. This gives Claude the autonomy to work efficiently while keeping guardrails in place. Set up your permission configuration once, and then check it into Git for use on other projects. The last tip in the master section is tip number 52, use hooks to add determinism to your Claude Code workflow. Hooks are scripts that can run automatically at certain points in the Claude Code lifecycle. Think of hooks as inserting determinism into an otherwise non-deterministic workflow. There are more than 10 different hook events, from pre-tool use to session end, but there's one hook that I recommend starting with, and that's the stop hook. The stop hook fires when Claude finishes responding. For example, you can automatically run a set of tests after every response to ensure that Claude never moves forward with broken code. This single hook will dramatically improve the reliability of your Claude Code workflow. To create hooks, just use the /hooks command, or just ask Claude to create them for you. You can also use the Hookify plugin from Anthropic to easily create custom hooks to prevent unwanted behavior. And with that, we successfully covered 12 months of Claude Code lessons. Congrats on making it this far in the video. Now, if you want to take what you learned in this video and apply it to build real-world projects with hands-on help from me and a community of fellow builders, here's 2 steps that you can take. If you're just getting started, check out Claude Code for Beginners, my weekend bootcamp to get you up and running with Claude Code and building your first project in just 2 days. If you're more experienced and want to become a power user, check out my 8-day AI coding accelerator, Ship with Claude Code and Replit. But don't just take my word for it. Check out the reviews from past students who are engineers, PMs, founders, and executives who went through the course. Use code YouTube to get 20% off both courses. The links are in the video description. So that's it. If you've learned something from this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Claude Code and AI coding videos. And let me know in the comments which lessons you found most useful or which tips you're most excited to try. Catch you in the next one.